The Islanders have made multiple moves heading into tonight's game against the Detroit Red Wings, and this is huge, especially with a 4-game road trip ahead after this game. We're going to break it all down on this episode of Islanders Digest, talking about two players who could potentially be making their debut for the Islanders soon, including one player who is on the cusp of making their NHL debut, and what has to happen in order for that to happen. A lot of news to cover, and I think the biggest story right now is Max Shabanov will not be playing tonight, and we were told yesterday that it was a maintenance thing, that he was not skating. Now he's a day-to-day player, and I really don't have too much concern for Shabanov if this is a very minor injury and he's playing again on Saturday. I don't mind if he misses a single game. Matt from Twitter brought up a point that Shabanov has been really proving some of the doubters wrong, playing really good for the Islanders. There is some concern of a player like him getting injured, especially because of all the talk about the size. For me, I'm going to actually push back. I'm not concerned at all when it comes to Shabanov at all yet, and a big part of why is just how physical that game was. Ottawa really seems to be targeting him at points, and while he is pretty beat up right now, he took it pretty well. This would be a different story if he took a hit to the head and absolutely got laid out on the ice, could not get up. Obviously, that would be concerning and more indicative towards a player like him cannot play in the NHL. From what we've seen so far, he handles physicality really well. He actually gives it back. And a player missing a single game is not a big deal, but it is going to be something to keep an eye out, especially because the Islanders' last maintenance injury turned out to be way more than maintenance, with Romanov going from missing a practice to missing one game to now potentially missing this entire road trip. Definitely a concern. The Islanders have said for now that he's only be out for 2 or 3 games, but considering that this keeps on expanding, it's definitely something of note, and a really big reason why the Islanders elected to send Marc Gatcomb down on waivers so they could call up a defenseman. Now, a lot of you are probably wondering why Marc Gatcomb was sent down if they were just going to bring back Mathew Highmore, who was another forward. Does this mean that Mathew Highmore is passing Marc Gatcomb on the waiver wire, on the depth chart list of the Islanders? No, we're going to explain that in just one bit, but I do want to clarify, for those of you who were concerned yesterday that Marc Gatcomb would get claimed, that has not happened. He is still with the Islanders. He'll be reporting to the Bridgeport Islanders, where he'll likely play this weekend, maybe even play with Callum Ritchie. There's no team claimed him. He belongs to the Islanders. You don't have to worry about that anymore. They cannot claim him anymore. It's too late. In fact, he can't be claimed again for the rest of the month. He can now be sent up and down because he has cleared waivers. And Arthur Staple made a pretty funny tweet about this that I think we do need to remember when it comes to these paper transactions. Well, more than paper, he is reporting, but say it to yourself and repeat it when you need to. Your team's 14th forward is not another team's diamond in the rough. And I think this happens a lot with hockey because we are closer to the players on our team than outsiders are. We really like what Marc Gatcomb has brought to the table, but we have to remember every single team has 3 or 4 Marc Gatcombs, players just like him. In fact, Mathew Highmore is not all that different than Marc Gatcomb. Marc Gatcomb is the better player, which is why we're going to explain why this move happens. But he really is not all that unique when it comes to players. I was curious yesterday if he get claimed, just because we have a couple teams such as Vancouver and Ottawa who are dealing with a lot of injuries and might need an NHL ready body. But I also didn't consider those teams both have their guys in the minors who they trust and who know their system. So really wouldn't make that much sense for a team to claim Gatcomb. When you see players claimed, it's mostly because a team believes there's a lot more potential for that player. That's what happened last year with Wahlstrom. The Bruins thought that they could bring something out of him, and then they saw how he played on the ice and realized they were wrong there. Really curious what Wahlstrom is up to now. I don't believe he made the San Jose Sharks out of camp. Maybe he might be playing with the Barracuda. But getting back on track, the Islanders did not lose Marc Gatcomb. And now we can talk about the players they brought in. And the first one we're going to talk about is Mathew Highmore, because this is the one that is probably raising eyebrows, because why would you send down Marc Gatcomb for another forward? Does that mean that the Islanders are losing interest in Marc Gatcomb? Not at all. The reason why Mathew Highmore was called up was simply because they could afford to call him up. Marc Gatcomb makes $900,000. And why that's important, also, Puckpedia has not updated the money, but I think it's helpful to show how much money the Islanders have. And this is a potential flaw with the way the Islanders are built, and something we're going to have to look into as the season goes on. Matthew Darche has made it very clear the Islanders are not going to be using LTIR if they can avoid it. And this gets complicated because you already have Varlamov, who who's on LTIR. That's $1 million that you have to give to Dave Rittich. It would not be an issue if you're putting Varlamov on LTIR, but because you're not, that's another contract that's on the books. The way this basically works is when you're not using LTIR, you can call up more players for your guys on the IR. However, you can't use up that money, and as a result, the Islanders previously had $647,000, and why that is notable is a league minimum contract in the NHL is $775,000, meaning the Islanders could not call anyone up, and Marc Gatcomb making $900,000 really complicated things. Other players, such as Matthew Highmore, only make $775,000. So what the Islanders basically did is by sending Marc Gatcomb down, they saved $200,000, and as a result, they could then bring. Actually, they saved the full length of his contract in $900,000, and then with that, they then had $1.5 million where they were able to call up two players, and the two players they chose were Matthew Highmore and Marshall Warren. Matthew Highmore is simply going to be the 14th forward during this road trip because they can't afford to have Gatcomb if they want to have Marshall Warren in the lineup. Marshall Warren is clearly the player the Islanders wanted to call up. We're going to talk about why right now. Marshall Warren is a defenseman, and as we know, the Islanders are not only struggling on defense, but with Romanov out for injury, they need an extra defenseman. You always want to travel with 7 defensemen. Marshall Warren is not going to start in a game right away. I think some people are really excited, thinking he's going to have his NHL debut, and that might happen, because again, we have a 4-game road trip coming up. However, in order for Marshall Warren to get in the game, I believe somebody is going to have to get injured. So, unfortunately, ideally, he does not get his NHL debut yet. Although, the way things are trending in Bridgeport, with him taking another step in his development, I know he's an older player at age 24, but he is a player who is potentially showing that he can be an NHL player, which is why a lot of fans are excited. Who knows? Maybe if the Islanders' defense plays really bad as well, he might also get an opportunity. Because now, again, he's already up with the big club. They can put him in a game. He won't be playing tonight against the Detroit Red Wings. Tonight, the Islanders will be playing with a similar top 6 they've been playing all season. Instead of Romanov, they will be playing Adam Bovequist with Tony DeAngelo. And this is not just an opportunity for potentially Marshall Warren to get in, which is why it's very notable the Islanders are making changes here. There's a chance here, especially with how Tony DeAngelo has been playing, that Adam Bovequist can steal Tony's job. Tonight they're playing together, but while they're on that pair, Adam Bovequist is going to be playing on his offside. If Adam Bovequist has a better game than Tony DeAngelo, as he had in the previous game, this might be a situation where Patrick Waugh might take a longer look here, and once Romanov is healthy, maybe try out a pair with Adam Bovequist and Adam Bovequist and Alexander Romanov, because clearly things have not been working. As a result, I know a lot of fans want to see Marshall Warren. I just believe, based on the way that the roster is, and based on what Patrick Waugh said in his press conference, I believe at this time Marshall Warren and both Marshall Warren and Matthew Highmore are more here for insurance purposes. Of course, you always want to travel with extra players, because especially when it comes to the Islanders defense, we know injuries happen, and of course, anybody can get hurt. We've seen it all last season. The Islanders really struggle to stay healthy, so it makes sense to travel with extra players. Unfortunately, I don't think Marshall Warren will be getting in the game, but I do want to highlight, just looking at his stats, so far in the AHL, he has 5 points, and this is a continuation from a really strong preseason. You don't want to look too much into points, especially in the first week. So many people right now on Twitter talk about like prospects, like, oh, this guy's on pace for 200 points 5 games in. It's like super silly. But with Warren, it is very notable that he's already a fourth of the way towards his point total last season, and he has been consistently growing into a more stable defenseman at the pro level. And while he is 24, I do think there is a potential fringe NHL player here. I'm not going to say that he's a future top 4 defenseman, but that's why you're seeing a player like Marshall Warren here instead of Isaiah George. That's the last thing I want to touch on. Some fans are going to be disappointed that this is not Isaiah George. They want Isaiah George to get a chance with the Islanders, and simply, if they needed a defenseman to play in the NHL and they knew this player was going to get a 4 or 5 game stretch, it would be Isaiah George. But because this is more a precautionary move, they want him to consistently play in the AHL, and Warren is an older player. It makes more sense to potentially get him a look if there's an injury. But I'd love to know your thoughts with these moves in the comments below. Are you concerned about Shabanov? Are you upset about Marc Gatcomb being sent down? Again, he is still with the Islanders, so really there's no harm, no foul. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. As always, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm your host, Patrick Nilan. Catch you on the next episode of Islanders Digest. Let's go, Islanders.